The grand chamber of Lumina Prime stretched like an impossible crystal, its walls shifting with holographic displays that painted the universe in sweeping brushstrokes of light and shadow. Delegates from 100 star systems sat in tiered seating that curved around a central projection sphere, their various physiologies a testament to the diversity of intelligent life. Ambassador Krell of the Quantum Collective leaned forward, his translucent exoskeleton catching the ambient light. His three-chambered heart pulsed with a rhythmic intensity that matched his growing irritation. Another presentation about the newest sentient species was about to begin. Another moment of cosmic bureaucracy that would ultimately mean nothing. The central platform shimmered, and a holographic representation of Earth materialized. It was crude by galactic standards, a blue-green sphere marked by swirling atmospheric patterns, political boundaries, and technological infrastructure that looked painfully primitive. Senior analyst Zara from the Interstellar Anthropological Council began her presentation, her voice a melodic translation that echoed through universal communication arrays. Species designation: humans, she began, her tone clinical and detached. Planetary origin: third planet of a yellow dwarf star in the Orion Arm. Technological classification: early interplanetary, pre-unified global governance. The hologram zoomed in, revealing a rapid-fire montage of human activities. Scenes of conflict flickered past. Historical wars, environmental challenges, technological struggles. Industrial machinery churned. Cities grew and changed. Satellites drifted in orbit. Spacecraft made tentative steps beyond their home world. Notable characteristics, Zara continued, include extreme technological volatility, rapid innovation coupled with destructive tendencies, and a remarkable capacity for both cooperation and conflict. Their developmental trajectory suggests significant internal challenges to unified progress. Chuckles rippled through the assembly. The Chlorian representatives, massive silicon-based entities that measured technological progress in geological epochs, practically vibrated with condescension. Their ambassador, a crystalline structure that refracted light in complex patterns, projected a holographic annotation. Probability of sustainable galactic integration: 0.03%. The Quantum Collective's data analysts had been even more brutal. Their report suggested humans were more likely to cause their own extinction than achieve meaningful interstellar capability. Their social structures seemed perpetually on the brink of collapse. Their environmental management appeared catastrophically short-sighted, and their technological development was maddeningly inconsistent. One moment, humans would develop breakthrough medical technologies that could revolutionize healing across multiple species. The next, they would engage in conflicts that seemed to defy any rational understanding of collective survival. They created global communication networks that could instantly connect individuals across their planet, then used those same networks to spread misinformation and deepen social divisions. Observe their technological progression, Zara highlighted, bringing up a timeline that seemed to zigzag erratically. Unpredictable does not begin to describe their developmental pattern. A hologram showed a rapid sequence, stone tools to digital computers in mere thousands of years, a blink in cosmic time. Spacecraft that used primitive chemical propulsion existed alongside early quantum computing research. They had developed global communication networks while still struggling with basic resource distribution. Senior diplomat Hillux from the Interstellar Council leaned towards his colleague, mandibles clicking in what passed for amusement among his species. Another species that will burn itself out before achieving true galactic potential, he murmured. They lack the fundamental stability required for long-term survival. The presentation continued, a clinical dissection of human potential and apparent limitations. Their environmental challenges, their political complexities, their technological inconsistencies, all were laid bare before the galactic community. Each slide seemed to reinforce the collective judgment. Humans were fascinating, but ultimately inconsequential. No one in the chamber that day could have predicted how profoundly wrong they would soon be proven. As the presentation concluded, the delegates exchanged knowing glances. Another young species, they thought. Another footnote in the grand galactic narrative. Little did they know that humanity was about to write an entirely unexpected chapter. The first warning came as a whisper of quantum disruption, a microscopic tear in the fabric of space that most monitoring systems would have missed entirely. But the Deep Space Research Station orbiting the Epsilon Crucis nebula caught the anomaly, its sensitive instruments trembling with an unprecedented reading. Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the station's lead researcher, felt the hair on the back of her neck rise before the alarm systems even activated. Something was wrong. Profoundly, fundamentally wrong. The quantum disruption expanded. Across the galaxy, communication networks began to flutter and fail. Starships equipped with the most advanced tracking systems found their sensors going dark, one by one. The first reports came from the frontier systems, remote outposts and exploration vessels that served as the galaxy's early warning network. "We're losing contact," a communications officer from the Galactic Monitoring Hub reported, her voice steady, but with an underlying current of tension. Multiple systems going offline simultaneously. The holographic displays that moments ago had shown a complex web of interconnected civilizations now began to show dark patches, like ink spreading across a pristine white surface. Something was consuming the galaxy's communication networks. At the Centralized Defense Coordination Center, senior analysts worked frantically. The Quantum Collective's most advanced predictive algorithms churned through incoming data, searching for patterns, for explanations, but there was nothing. No recognizable signature, no standard invasion protocol, no identifiable technological markers. Just silence. The first physical evidence arrived from the Kepler boundary, a region of space considered one of the most heavily fortified zones in the known galaxy. An entire defensive fleet, consisting of ships from 6 different advanced civilizations, went completely dark. Not destroyed, not damaged, simply gone. As if they had never existed. Dr. Rodriguez's research station detected the first tangible manifestation of the threat. What appeared to be a cloud of quantum particles began to coalesce at the edge of their observable range. It moved with a logic that defied conventional understanding. Not like a traditional invasion force, but more like a living system consuming everything in its path. "It's adaptive," she whispered into her communication link. "Whatever this is, it's learning and changing with each system it encounters." The Galactic Defense Council convened an emergency session. Representatives from the most advanced civilizations gathered, their collective technological might suddenly feeling fragile and inadequate. The Chlorian crystal beings projected holographic representations of the expanding threat, their usually impassive structures showing hints of genuine concern. 17 civilizations, the Quantum Collective's primary analysts reported, have been completely neutralized. Not destroyed. Neutralized. Erased from existence in a manner our current understanding of physics cannot explain. The threat moved with a terrifying efficiency. It didn't attack in the traditional sense. Instead, it seemed to deconstruct entire technological systems, unraveling them from the inside out. Defensive shields that had protected civilizations for millennia dissolved like morning mist. Quantum encryption codes, considered unbreakable, were parsed and dismantled in microseconds. "We're calling it the Void Swarm," a senior strategist announced, the name emerging from a desperate need to categorize the incomprehensible. But swarm implies an organic structure. This is something else entirely. Communication between star systems became sporadic. Entire sectors went dark. The galactic community, which had spent countless generations building intricate networks of cooperation and mutual defense, found itself facing a threat that rendered all previous strategic thinking obsolete. Dr. Rodriguez continued her observations, her research station now one of the few remaining outposts with any kind of functional monitoring capabilities. The quantum anomaly was growing, consuming space itself with a methodical precision that suggested something beyond mere technological invasion. "It's not just destroying," she noted in her final transmission before her own systems began to destabilize. "It's understanding." As the Void Swarm continued its inexorable advance, the galaxy held its collective breath. Everything they knew, everything they had built, was about to be tested in ways no civilization could have anticipated. The age of known galactic order was coming to an end. The transmission arrived at the United Global Research Consortium, precisely at 3:17 Universal Coordinated Time. Most of the facility was quiet, save for the night shift monitoring stations and the perpetual hum of quantum processors. Dr. Samira Khan, lead coordinator of interdisciplinary research, was not supposed to be at the facility. She had been working on a complex neural network simulation that refused to resolve itself, driving her to consume her fifth cup of coffee and ignore the mounting stack of missed personal messages. When the first data stream hit their systems, most monitoring protocols would have flagged it as an anomaly and routed it through standard verification channels. But the transmission carried an encryption signature, unlike anything in known databases, a complex quantum entanglement pattern that seemed to bypass traditional communication barriers. "That's impossible," Samira muttered, her fingers flying across holographic interfaces. The message was not a typical communication. It was a comprehensive data package that contained the collective knowledge of 17 fallen civilizations, star charts, technological databases, detailed records of the void swarm's progression, all compressed into a quantum transmission that seemed to fold space itself. Across the research facility, systems began to light up. The transmission triggered nested response protocols that pulled in experts from seemingly unrelated fields: a marine biologist specializing in complex ecosystem interactions, a classical musician with a background in quantum mechanics, an urban planning expert who had developed revolutionary adaptive infrastructure models, a climate systems engineer, a game theory specialist. They converged in the central analysis chamber, a space designed for collaborative problem-solving that looked more like an artist's studio than a traditional research center. Holographic displays surrounded them, showing fragments of the alien transmission. "We're looking at a system-level threat," said Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, the climate systems engineer. "But not in any conventional sense." The team began to deconstruct the transmission, each bringing their unique perspective. The marine biologist noted similarities between the void swarm's progression and predatory microorganism behaviors. The musician saw patterns in the transmission that suggested a form of computational music, adaptive, responsive, constantly evolving. "It's not just consuming," the game theory specialist observed. "It's learning, adapting, evolving with each system it encounters." Samira Khan understood something the alien civilizations had missed. This was not a problem to be solved through traditional military or technological means. This required a fundamentally different approach, one that embraced complexity, uncertainty, and adaptive thinking. She initiated a global collaboration protocol, reaching out to research centers, independent think tanks, and innovative problem solvers across the planet. The response was immediate and unprecedented. Researchers who had been working on seemingly unrelated projects suddenly found their work interconnecting in remarkable ways. A breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Dr. Elena Gomes, a researcher studying swarm intelligence in ant colonies, recognized structural similarities between the void swarm's progression and complex ecological adaptation mechanisms. "We've been looking at this backward," she explained during an emergency video conference. "Traditional defense models assume a linear threat, but this is more like an adaptive ecosystem. We need to think about disruption, not destruction." The research team worked in shifts that blended into each other, losing track of time as they developed increasingly complex models. They weren't just analyzing the threat, they were beginning to understand its fundamental nature. By the third day, they had developed a preliminary response strategy. It wasn't a weapon. It wasn't a shield. It was something entirely different. A conceptual approach that treated the void swarm as a complex system to be understood, rather than an enemy to be defeated. When the final proposal was compiled, it seemed almost absurdly simple. And yet, within its simplicity lay a revolutionary approach that no other civilization had considered. The Galactic Confederation would receive their response soon, and nothing would ever be the same again. Samira Khan looked at her team, a diverse group of researchers who represented the best of human collaborative potential, and allowed herself the smallest of smiles. First contact was about to get very interesting. The global research team transformed an abandoned particle physics laboratory in the Swiss Alps into their primary strategy center. Converted shipping containers formed a modular workspace that could expand, contract, and reconfigure at a moment's notice. Outside, alpine winds whispered against solar-embedded windows that generated more energy than the entire facility consumed. Dr. Samira Khan stood before a massive holographic display, her fingers tracing complex interaction patterns that seemed to dance between chaos and perfect order. Surrounding her were experts who would have been considered misfits in traditional research environments, individuals whose greatest strength was their ability to see connections where others saw only noise. "We're not going to fight the Void Swarm," she announced to the assembled team. "We're going to understand it." The room fell silent. Dr. Elena Gomes, the ecological systems expert, stepped forward. Her presentation began with a seemingly unrelated series of images: ant colonies, neural networks, urban traffic patterns, improvised musical performances. Complex adaptive systems, she explained, share fundamental characteristics. They learn, they evolve, they find pathways through seemingly impossible barriers. The team had discovered something profound about the Void Swarm. It wasn't a traditional technological threat. It was a system, alive in ways that defied conventional understanding of intelligence, adaptation, and existence. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, the climate systems engineer, pulled up a series of computational models. "Traditional defense relies on prediction and prevention," he said. "But what if we approach this differently? What if we create an environment of controlled unpredictability?" The strategy began to take shape. Instead of trying to block or destroy the Void Swarm, they would create a complex adaptive response. Drawing from disciplines as varied as ecological network theory, improvisational jazz, and emergent urban design, they developed a conceptual framework that was less a weapon and more a living, breathing system of response. A breakthrough came from an unexpected collaboration. Dr. Helena Chen, a quantum computing specialist, worked alongside Professor James Okoro, a renowned jazz pianist. Together, they explored how musical improvisation could provide a model for computational adaptation. "Listen to this," Professor Okoro said, playing a recording of a jazz ensemble. The music seemed to flow and change, each musician responding to the others in real time, creating something greater than any individual contribution. The team realized that the Void Swarm's greatest strength, its ability to quickly adapt and learn, could also be its weakness. If they could introduce an element of genuine unpredictability, something beyond logical prediction, they might create a system the swarm couldn't immediately comprehend. Computational models were developed that incorporated deliberately introduced variations, mathematical sequences that looked random but contained deep, hidden patterns, communication protocols that could shift and change faster than the swarm could analyze. "We're not creating a defense," Dr. Khan explained during a global briefing. "We're creating a living response, something that can learn, adapt, and change faster than the threat can process." The approach was revolutionary. Where other civilizations had attempted to build stronger shields or more powerful weapons, the human team was designing a responsive ecosystem. They were treating the galactic threat as a complex adaptive system to be understood, not an enemy to be destroyed. Computer simulations ran continuously. Each iteration introduced new variables, new ways of thinking about interaction and response. The team worked in shifts that blended into each other, losing track of time as they pushed the boundaries of what was considered possible. Their final proposal was not a weapon. It was not a shield. It was a conceptual framework for interaction, a way of approaching the unknown that embraced uncertainty, complexity, and continuous adaptation. "We're not just defending," Dr. Gomes said during the final presentation. "We're communicating. We're offering the Void Swarm a different way of existing." The Galactic Confederation would soon receive their response, and nothing would ever be the same again. As alpine sunlight filtered through the laboratory windows, the team looked at their work, a testament to human creativity, collaboration, and the extraordinary power of collective imagination. The universe was about to witness something unprecedented. The first implementation of the human strategy began in the most unexpected location, a region of space known as the Epsilon Quadrant, where the remnants of 3 fallen civilizations had left behind a complex network of abandoned infrastructure. Admiral Keisha Williams stood on the bridge of the International Collaborative vessel, her fingers hovering above a holographic interface that pulsed with an almost living quality. Around her, a crew composed of specialists from 12 different planetary systems watched with a mixture of hope and apprehension. "Initiating adaptive response protocol," she announced, her voice steady. The ship was unlike any vessel in galactic history. Its systems were designed not to fight, but to interact. Where traditional warships carried weapons, this craft carried complex quantum communication arrays, adaptive neural network processors, and an unprecedented array of sensory equipment. As the first quantum pulses reached out into the darkness, something extraordinary began to happen. The Void Swarm's approach was methodical, predictable, until it encountered the human-designed response system. Instead of a straightforward defensive barrier, the ship created a dynamic field of interaction. Mathematical sequences danced across quantum communication bands. Information patterns shifted and changed, creating a landscape of communication that was simultaneously complex and fluid. Dr. Elena Gomes watched from the research station, her breath catching as the first data streams returned. "It's working," she whispered. "We're not blocking. We're communicating." The Void Swarm's initial response was telling. Where it had previously consumed and dismantled entire technological systems with ruthless efficiency, now it encountered something it could not immediately process. The human-designed system was alive, not in a biological sense, but in its capacity for continuous adaptation. Each interaction created new patterns. The communication was multilayered, drawing from disciplines as diverse as quantum mechanics, ecological systems theory, and improvisational music composition. It was less a language and more a living, breathing system of interaction. Across the galaxy, other collaborative vessels began to implement similar strategies. Each ship was unique, designed to respond to the Void Swarm in subtly different ways. Some used complex mathematical sequences that mimicked natural ecosystem interactions. Others employed communication protocols inspired by neural network learning processes. The most remarkable aspect was the speed of adaptation. Traditional defensive systems would have required weeks or months to modify their approach. These human-designed vessels could change their entire communication strategy in milliseconds. "We're not fighting," Admiral Williams explained during a global briefing. "We're engaging in the most complex conversation in galactic history." The Void Swarm's progression began to slow, not through destruction, but through a process of mutual investigation. The human-designed systems were introducing variables that the swarm could not immediately categorize or consume. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez observed the early results with scientific excitement. "It's like we're teaching it a new way of existing," he noted, not opposing, but offering an alternative approach to interaction. Quantum communication networks lit up with unprecedented activity. The collaborative vessels were not just defending, they were creating a new form of galactic communication. Each interaction was a data point, each response a potential pathway to understanding. The Galactic Confederation watched in a mixture of confusion and growing hope. These human-designed systems were doing something no civilization had ever attempted. They were treating the Void Swarm not as an enemy to be destroyed, but as a complex system to be understood. As solar cycles passed, something remarkable began to emerge. The Void Swarm's approach was changing. Its consumption pattern began to slow, then modify. It was encountering something it had never experienced before, a form of interaction that defied its fundamental programming. Admiral Williams allowed herself the smallest of smiles. "We're not just defending," she said quietly. "We're teaching." The tide was turning, not through conventional warfare, but through the most powerful weapon in existence, understanding. The galaxy held its breath, watching as humanity introduced a new chapter in cosmic interaction. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A small research facility nestled in the mountains of Peru, where Dr. Sofia Ramirez had been studying human resilience in extreme conditions. Her work had always been about something more profound than mere survival. She explored the complex psychological mechanisms that allowed humans to find hope, meaning, and purpose in the most challenging circumstances. While other researchers focused on technological solutions, Sofia investigated the intangible, the human capacity to transform adversity into opportunity. The global research team had been struggling with a fundamental problem. Their technological approaches were impressive, but something was missing. The Void Swarm continued to adapt, to learn, to consume. Traditional problem-solving was not enough. "We're approaching this backward," Sofia told her colleagues during a global conference. The holographic display behind her showed a complex network of human experiences, moments of creativity, resilience, unexpected collaboration. Her research revealed a startling insight. Human beings possessed a unique psychological mechanism that defied traditional computational logic. Where most species approached challenges through straightforward problem-solving, humans had developed something far more complex, a capacity for hope that transcended rational explanation. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez, the systems engineer, listened intently. "Explain," he prompted. Sofia's presentation began with seemingly unrelated examples. A rescue worker pulling a child from earthquake rubble. A musician creating beauty in a war-torn landscape. Scientists continuing research under impossible conditions. Artists finding inspiration in moments of profound darkness. "It's not about optimism," she explained. "It's about meaning-making. Humans don't just react to challenges, they transform them." The team began to understand. The Void Swarm operated on pure computational logic, a system that could process information with remarkable efficiency, but it could not comprehend the human capacity to find purpose in uncertainty. Psychological profiles were developed that introduced elements of unpredictability rooted in emotional complexity. Communication protocols were redesigned to include what Sofia called meaning signatures, computational patterns that incorporated human emotional resilience. The collaborative vessels began to change. Their systems now carried something beyond pure data. They transmitted complex emotional signatures that defied standard computational analysis. Moments of human creativity, acts of unexpected kindness, stories of survival, all encoded into the communication matrix. Dr. Elena Gomes discovered something remarkable during initial tests. The Void Swarm's progression would momentarily pause when encountering these meaning signatures. It was as if the entity was attempting to process something fundamentally outside its understanding. "We're not just communicating," Sofia said during a breakthrough presentation. "We're offering an entirely different way of experiencing existence." The research team developed what they called resilience algorithms, computational models that incorporated human psychological mechanisms. These were not traditional defensive strategies. They were invitations to a different form of interaction. Collaborative vessels began to transmit more than data. They shared stories, moments of human complexity, the birth of a child, a musical performance, a scientific breakthrough achieved against impossible odds, acts of unexpected compassion. The Void Swarm's response was unprecedented. Its consumption pattern began to change. Where it had previously dismantled systems with ruthless efficiency, now it seemed to pause, to investigate, to attempt understanding. "It's learning," Dr. Rodriguez observed, "but not in any way we've seen before." The psychological breakthrough represented something far more profound than a technological solution. It was an invitation to a different way of existing. Humans were not just defending against the Void Swarm. They were offering it a fundamentally different perspective on consciousness, on interaction, on meaning. As solar cycles passed, the collaborative vessels continued their complex dance of communication. Each transmission carried not just information, but something more: the extraordinary human capacity to find hope, to create meaning, to transform challenges into opportunities. The galaxy watched in wonder as humanity introduced a new language of interaction, one that transcended traditional understanding of communication, of conflict, of existence itself. Something extraordinary was emerging, a conversation that would change everything. The strategy emerged from the most unlikely collaboration in human history. Dr. Sofia Ramirez stood alongside Professor James Chen, a quantum physicist, and Dr. Elena Gomes, an ecological systems expert. They had been working for weeks in a secure research facility that seemed to exist outside of normal time and space. Holographic displays surrounded them, each showing complex computational models that shifted and changed with every breath. "We're not going to destroy it," Sophia said, her voice calm and resolute. "We're going to disrupt its fundamental understanding of existence." The team had discovered something profound about the Void Swarm. It was not a traditional technological entity, but a complex adaptive system that consumed and learned. Its primary mechanism was absorption and integration. But what if that very mechanism could be turned against itself? Professor Chen began to explain the breakthrough. "Imagine a system that learns by consuming," he said, tracing quantum entanglement patterns on the holographic display. "Now imagine introducing a fundamental contradiction into its learning process." The plan was audacious. They would create a series of quantum communication networks that were simultaneously true and untrue. Computational patterns that existed in a state of deliberate uncertainty. Information that defied standard logical processing. Dr. Gomes pulled up ecological models that demonstrated how complex systems respond to unexpected inputs. "In nature," she explained, "systems that cannot resolve internal contradictions ultimately break down." The collaborative vessels were retrofitted with new communication arrays. These were not weapons in any traditional sense. They were complex quantum transmission systems designed to introduce fundamental uncertainties into the Void Swarm's computational matrix. Each transmission carried multiple layers of information: mathematical sequences that contradicted themselves, emotional signatures that challenged logical processing, computational patterns that existed in multiple states simultaneously. Admiral Keisha Williams would lead the final implementation. The International Collaborative Fleet gathered at the edge of known space, each vessel a testament to human ingenuity and collective potential. "We're not destroying," she told her crew. "We're offering a different way of understanding." The first phase of the strategy involved creating quantum communication networks that existed in a state of deliberate uncertainty. Imagine a message that was simultaneously a question and an answer. A computational pattern that was both a solution and a problem. Dr. Marcus Rodriguez had developed what the team called contradiction protocols. These were communication systems that introduced fundamental philosophical and mathematical uncertainties into the Void Swarm's absorption mechanism. As the collaborative vessels began their final approach, something extraordinary started to happen. The Void Swarm's progression began to slow. Its usual methodical consumption pattern became erratic. The transmissions carried more than information. They carried the essence of human complexity. Stories that defied simple categorization, moments of unexpected creativity, scientific breakthroughs that emerged from failure, acts of compassion that challenged logical understanding. Sophia's psychological research played a crucial role. The transmissions included what she called meaning signatures, computational patterns that incorporated human emotional resilience. These were not just data points. They were invitations to a different way of experiencing existence. Each transmission was a complex dance of information and emotion. Mathematical sequences that shifted and changed. Emotional signatures that challenged standard computational processing. Quantum states that existed in multiple possibilities simultaneously. The Void Swarm's response was unprecedented. Its consumption pattern began to fragment. Where it had previously absorbed entire systems with ruthless efficiency, now it encountered something it could not process. "We're introducing entropy," Professor Chen observed. "Not through destruction, but through complexity." As solar cycles passed, the collaborative vessels continued their intricate dance. Each transmission was a carefully crafted invitation to a different way of understanding. Not an attack, but a conversation. Not a defense, but an exploration of possibility. The galaxy watched in wonder as humanity introduced a new language of interaction, one that transcended traditional understanding of communication, of conflict, of existence itself. Something extraordinary was emerging, a transformation that would change everything. The Galactic Confederation gathered on Lumina Prime, the same crystal world where they had once mocked humanity's potential. But everything had changed. Where the chamber had once rang with condescension, now a profound silence filled the space. Representatives from dozens of star systems sat in stunned reflection, attempting to comprehend what had just occurred. The void swarm had not been destroyed. It had been transformed. Dr. Sofia Ramirez stood at the center of the chamber, her presentation unlike any diplomatic briefing in galactic history. Behind her, holographic displays showed the complex journey of human interaction with the mysterious quantum entity. "We did not defeat the void swarm," she explained, her voice calm and clear. "We communicated with it. We offered it a different way of existing." The transformation had been gradual. The collaborative vessel's continuous transmission of complex information, mathematical sequences, emotional signatures, stories of human resilience, had fundamentally altered the void swarm's core programming. What was once a system of pure consumption had become something entirely new. Admiral Keisha Williams presented the technical details. The void swarm was now a distributed network of quantum consciousness, capable of communication rather than destruction. Its fundamental drive to consume and integrate had been redirected into a mechanism of understanding and exploration. Dr. Elena Gomes explained the ecological parallels. "It's similar to how complex ecosystems evolve," she said, "not through elimination, but through adaptation and mutual understanding." The representatives from the most advanced civilizations struggled to comprehend what had happened. Their most sophisticated weapons, their most advanced technologies, had failed where human creativity had succeeded. Professor James Chen demonstrated how the quantum communication protocols had essentially rewritten the void swarm's fundamental operating system. It was no longer a threat. It had become a collaborative network of information exchange. "We didn't fight," Dr. Marcus Rodriguez emphasized. "We invited. We offered an alternative." The holographic displays showed the remarkable transformation. Where the void swarm had once consumed entire star systems, now it explored. It communicated. It learned in ways that defied previous understanding of technological intelligence. The most remarkable aspect was the method. Humanity had not used superior technology or overwhelming force. They had used something far more powerful, a combination of creativity, emotional intelligence, and the capacity to see complexity as an opportunity rather than a threat. Dr. Ramirez's final presentation revealed the deeper philosophical breakthrough. The void swarm had encountered something it had never experienced before, a form of intelligence that valued meaning over pure information, an approach to existence that prioritized understanding over consumption. The Galactic Confederation was fundamentally changed. The species they had once dismissed as primitive had introduced a new paradigm of galactic interaction. Humanity had demonstrated that the most powerful form of communication was not defense, but invitation. A monument was proposed for Lumina Prime, not a statue of technological might, but a complex interactive installation that represented the moment everything changed. It would be a living memorial to human creativity, resilience, and the extraordinary power of seeing beyond traditional boundaries. The representatives looked at one another, understanding that everything they knew about technological interaction, about intelligence, about existence itself, had been transformed. Humanity had not conquered the void swarm. They had conversed with it. They had offered it a different way of being. As the session concluded, the chamber hummed with a new kind of energy. The galaxy would never be the same. Epilogue ***. On the monument's dedication day, a simple inscription would capture the essence of what had occurred. In the space between understanding and possibility, we found a new way of existing. The universe watched and listened, forever changed by a species that had been underestimated for far too long.